Good morning, family, and welcome to CWA Hour of Power. I'm David Marshall, and for the next few weeks, I'll have the privilege of serving as your lead host while our brother Errol Minor takes a well-deserved break. Now, one thing I've learned throughout my life is that change doesn't happen because people wish for it. Change happens because ordinary people decided to get involved. And that's what this show is all about. We talk about labor, we talk about civil rights, we talk about voting rights, we talk about justice. But most importantly, we talk about people. Because behind every issue is a family, and behind every policy is a worker, and behind every movement are people who decided that silence was not an option. So thank you all for joining us today, and let's have an honest conversation. This is CWA Hour Power. Communication Workers of America invite you to the 2026 National Human Rights Conference happening August 16th through the 19th in Atlanta, Georgia. Come join us, union leaders and activists from across the country, as we come together to build power, advance justice, and fight for workers' rights. This year's conference will be held at the beautiful Westin Peachtree Plaza, located in the heart of downtown Atlanta. To register, visit cwahumanrights.com. Don't miss this opportunity to learn, connect, organize for a stronger, more just future. We hope to see you all in Atlanta. You are listening to KYOK 1140 AM and the all new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting kyokradio.org and pressing the listen live option. Tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, and 8 a.m. Pacific at kyokradio.org, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at CWA National Human Rights to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join the conversation. From toys to terror, how dehumanization has become normalized, part two. Now, last week, we didn't finish discussing this. And we were discussing how, the dehumanization has been used throughout history to justify discrimination, oppression, and violence. We talked about how Black children often feel denied innocence and how entire groups of people have been portrayed less than human, and how that process has repeatedly laid the foundation for injustice. And as we continue this conversation, joining us today is our awareness contributor, Micaiah Jones. Micaiah, although you were not on the show last week, you were still able to listen to the conversation. What were your thoughts?
Good morning. So yeah, David, I went back and I listened carefully, just because of this topic alone. And what struck me the most is that dehumanization rarely starts with violence, right? It starts with language, stereotypes, jokes, images. It starts with deciding who deserves our empathy and who does not. And what I heard throughout the first half of that discussion is that dehumanization is not just something that happened in the past. It's not limited to slavery. It's not limited to Jim Crow. It's not limited to one country, one race, or one generation. It's a pattern, right? And it repeats itself whenever people begin to see another group as less worthy of dignity, respect, or compassion. And that's why this conversation matters, because if we only recognize dehumanization when it becomes extreme, we miss all of the warnings that came before it.
And that's a great point, Micaiah, because too often, people think that dehumanization begins with violence, but in reality, it's usually the end result. Because the process starts much earlier.
Exactly. And if we're honest, we're seeing examples of that today. Across our nation, immigration has become one of the most divisive issues in public life. People have strong opinions about border security. People have strong opinions about laws and policies, and those debates will continue. But regardless of where someone stands politically, there's a line we should never cross. Like, we should never stop seeing people as human beings. Because once people are reduced to labels or just a statistic or a number, it becomes easier to ignore their suffering, easier to to kind of normalize things that shouldn't be normalized, right? And when people, like I said, become statistics instead of families, when they become talking points instead of parents or children, they become headlines instead of human beings, and that's when dehumanization begins.
I guess I think that's something that labor has always understood. Workers know what it feels like to be reduced to a number. Workers know what it feels like when people see labor costs instead of human beings. The same principle applies here. We can discuss policy, we can debate, solutions, but at the end of the day, we cannot lose our humanity in that process. One thing that I want to remind us is that history has shown us something important, that the target of dehumanization changes. But the strategy, it's always the same. At one point, it was enslaved Africans. At another point, it was immigrants from Ireland, Italy, and Eastern Europe. It's targeted indigenous communities. It's targeted religious minorities. It's targeted labor organizers, and it's targeted LGBTQIA plus communities. And today, many immigrants find themselves at the center of public fear, suspicion, and hostility. But the details, may be different, but the warning signs are very familiar. People are described as problems instead of people, and society should pay attention. Because there's a difference between you know uh, discussing immigration policy and questioning the humanity of immigrants. Because those are not the same things.
Exactly. And human rights begins with a simple principle. Every person possesses inherent dignity, right? Not because of citizenship or wealth or race or religion, but because they are just that, human beings, right? And once we start assigning different levels of humanity to different groups, history tells us we're heading down a dangerous road.
And social media often accelerates that process. People share videos, they share memes, they share stereotypes, they share misinformation. And over time, repeated exposure can make harmful ideas feel normal. That's how normalization works. People stop reacting, people stop questioning, people stop caring. And that is exactly what dehumanization depends on.
And one thing I keep thinking about is the word empathy. Because empathy is our ability to see ourselves in someone else's story. Like that's kind of what separates human beings from the rest of the animal kingdom out there. And the opposite of dehumanization is not agreement. It's empathy, right? You don't have to agree with someone's politics to recognize their humanity. You don't have to agree with someone's background to recognize their humanity. You don't have to agree with someone's circumstances to recognize their humanity. And that recognition is what makes democracy possible. It's what makes, like I said, human beings what they are, and it's what makes community possible. It's what makes solidarity possible, and I think that's one of the things that can stop us from going down this crazy road that we're going down right now.
Well, and it's so true. And that's really at the heart of today's discussion. Whether we're talking about a doll, whether we're talking about a new social media trend or racial stereotypes, if we're talking about immigrants or workers or any other group, the central question still remains the same. Who do we recognize as fully human? Because the answer to that question shapes everything else.
It does. And when we fail to recognize each other's humanity, everybody loses. Human rights suffer, communities suffer, workers suffer, democracy suffers. The lesson of history is not simply to remember the past. The lesson is to recognize the warning signs when they appear again.
And, perhaps that's the challenge we're leaving with our listeners today, right? Pay attention to the language, the images, the jokes, pay attention to stereotypes. Because like I said, no, it's not going to announce itself. It's not going to say, hi, I'm dehumanization, right? It usually decides itself as humor. And when you think about, even when it disguises itself as humor, it's like it's not funny, right? Like if it was being said to you or done to someone that you know or someone that you're cool with or your family member or your child or your parent or whatever, it wouldn't be funny, right? So pay attention to things like that, because fear, entertainment, politics, and just the way things are, like the status quo, that's how it shows up. And once we recognize it, we have a responsibility to change it and to challenge it.
And and that's a good place to stop here on this subject, because at the end of the day, the question is not whether we will encounter dehumanization, because history tells us that we're going to encounter it. The question is whether we'll recognize it when it appears. And the big thing is whether we'll have the courage to stand against it. So I'll leave you with this. Human rights begin when we recognize the humanity in one another. You're listening to KYOK 1140 AM and the all new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting kyokradio.org and pressing the listen live option. Tune in live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on kyokradio.org, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at CWA National Human Rights to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join the conversation. Our next block, we got something that we just had Father's Day this past week, and it's men all pause. The strength is the emotion. Um, for many families, social media last Sunday was filled with pictures, memories, and tributes and reflections about fathers, grandfathers, mentors, and father figures that helped shape our lives. But today, I would like for us to pause, not to debate any politics, not to discuss any organizing campaigns, not to talk about bargaining tables. Today I want this conversation to be about men, and more specifically, we want to talk to you about something that men rarely discuss publicly, and that's emotions. You know, there's an interesting reality many people notice as men get older. The same man who once seemed tough as nails suddenly tears up during a family gathering. The same father who rarely talked about feelings gets emotional watching his children succeed. The same grandfather who appeared almost invincible finds himself reflecting deeply on family, legacy, and relationships. Now, research tells us men don't necessarily become more emotional as they age. Instead, many become more comfortable expressing emotions they have carried their entire lives. And, and as a man, as my priorities change and my career slows down and children become adults and life, teaches us lesson, many of us begin to understand that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's wisdom. And perhaps that's where the real strength lives. So to help me unpack this conversation, I'm gonna turn it over to our own Timmia Wiley.
Thank you, David. I want every man listening right now to hear this. The strength was never the absence of emotion. The strength was the emotion. For generations, many men were taught that showing feelings made them weak. We were told to suck it up, tough it out, keep moving, don't cry, don't complain, don't let people see you hurting. But what if we've been defining strength all wrong? Think about fathers for a moment. A father gets up before sunrise, he works long shifts, he misses sleep, he worries about bills, he worries about keeping a roof over his family head, about whether his children are safe, about whether he's doing enough. What drives all of that? It's driven by emotion, love, responsibility, commitment, and hope. The very things many men were taught to discuss are often the things driving every decision they make. The overtime shift, emotion. Working a second job, emotion. Missing a meal so their children can eat, emotion. Driving across town to check on an elderly parent, emotion. The strength was never the absence of feeling. The strength was carrying enough to keep people going. David, I was talking to Errol the other day about Father's Day, and we started laughing because one of the hardest things his children say about shopping for him is that he's difficult to buy for. As they put it, Dad already has everything. And I think a lot of fathers can relate to that. When you spend your life working, sacrificing, building, collecting memories and experiences, your children eventually reach a point where they don't know what to buy you anymore. I'm in that boat with my father. But this year, his daughters did something different. They put together a Father's Day basket, primarily with products from Black-owned businesses. There were soaps, a bottle of Uncle Nearest, there was a card, but what touched him the most wasn't something they bought, it was something they created. His oldest daughter, Aria, gave him a journal. And inside that journal, she had written words of encouragement about his journey, his writing, his activism, and all the things she sees in his father. And Errol told me something that really stuck out with me. He said, I started reading it and the tears just began to fall, not because of the cost, not because of the gift itself, but because of the thought. Because someone you love saw you, really saw you, and let you know they were paying attention. And then he told me something else that made me laugh. Ariel looked at him and said, Daddy, I really love this new version of you. I love the emotions. I love the feelings. And then his oldest daughter, Jessica, jumped in and called both of them crybabies. Now that's a family right there. But honestly, I think there's a lesson in that story. The older we get, the less impressed we become by things, and the more moved we become by meaning. The gift wasn't the basket. The gift was being reminded that his daughters knew who he is and appreciate who he's becoming. That's powerful. See, it doesn't take a whole lot. It just don't. It doesn't. Researchers have found that many men become more emotionally balanced as they age. Older men often report less anger and less anxiety than younger men. They gain perspective. They start chasing every argument. They begin focusing on what truly matters. So, ladies, you're listening. If you if you're single, look at the older men. Um, and with men, men begin thinking about their relationships and their accomplishments. The promotion that once seemed to so important is nearly as meaningful as seeing your children and grandchildren thrive. The title becomes less important than the legacy. The paycheck becomes less important than the people. I don't know, Makia, what are your thoughts?
Well, that story doesn't surprise me at all. Because like maybe last year or the earlier part of this year, Errol and I had a conversation about emotions, and one of the things that he says all the time is, I have one day to get it all out. Like that's literally what he says. One day. One day he allows himself to release everything he's carrying, the frustrations, disappointments, loss, fear, stress, worries, everything. And when we first talked about it, I remember thinking, how many men are probably doing the exact same thing, right? Like they're carrying so much responsibility that they don't always feel like they have permission to feel. They keep moving, they keep working, they keep providing, they keep showing up. And then eventually those emotions need somewhere to go. And what I appreciate the most about the story is that it shows growth because for so long, like you said, men were taught that strength meant being hard. And I'm doing air quotes there for those of you who know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, it means like being tough. Like she said before, like don't cry, don't show your emotions, you can't be sad, you have to suck it up, that kind of thing. And to me, being to me, strength means being whole, right? Being your whole full self and following your joy and allowing yourself to feel, like to feel gratitude, to feel sad, to feel uh supported, and not just be support for someone else, and to cry when something touches your heart, whether it's happy or sad, and to tell people you love them while they're still here to hear it, and to just share in emotion. And maybe that's why so many men become more comfortable in their with their emotion as they age, not because they become weaker, but because they're finally realizing that they don't have to carry everything alone.
And as we sit here talking about these emotions, I think this conversation is bigger than Father's Day. At its core, this is also a human rights conversation. Every human deserves the dignity of being fully human. That means women, that means men, that means everybody across the board. And somewhere along the way, many men were taught that being human meant hiding parts of themselves, which is horrible. That's showing fear that showing fear was weakness, that expressing sadness was weakness, that asking for help was a weakness. But being human isn't weakness, it's humanity.
I agree. And when we talk about human rights, we often think about like voting rights, workplace rights, civil rights, economic justice, and those are all important, obviously. But human rights are also, like you said, about dignity. And dignity means allowing people to be their authentic selves. Men deserve spaces where they can talk about mental health. Men deserve spaces where they can discuss grief, where they can ask for help without shame. And that's not weakness, that's wellness, and that's so important.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, for our listeners to hear today because, when people are denied the ability to express pain, trauma doesn't disappear, it gets buried. And buried trauma also often shows up somewhere else. It can show up in broken relationships, it can show up in anger, it can show up in addiction, it can show up in violence, or even just show up in silence. And that's why, we have to have these conversations, not just for fathers, not just for men, but for families and communities as a whole.
But David, before we move on, let me ask you something. How was your Father's Day? Did anything happen that made you stop and think about this conversation we're having today?
Yeah, my Father's Day was amazing. I kind of the same thing that Errol had. It wasn't a journal. I got a book that basically chronicles, my life, like, where I was born and the things that I like and what happened to me, when I was a kid and what did I do after high school. And it's basically at my own pace, I can just write in all these little blocks of my life to keep as a keepsake, for the family so that, they can know a little bit more about me. And then, of course, I like toys. I'm big on like toy gifts and stuff. And my kids did an excellent job of getting the things that I like because I'm pretty simple. I like the same stuff. I wear the same wet pants and drink the same liquor and wear the same cologne. So it's one of those deals where, the whole family, even my wife, got me some sweatpants. I mean, it was one of those deals where I'm simple. I don't need anything extravagant. So like just the simple things make it such a special day. So without getting sappy, I just really enjoy having all the kids there, the whole family there together because they're all grown now and they got their own lives, and so I'm at that stage where I just enjoy them, coming over and spending time with me.
And that's powerful, David, because I think a lot of men aren't necessarily looking for recognition. They're really just looking for the connection.
Exactly, and I think many men express emotion differently. I'm one that don't cry. I've said I've had one feeling left since I was 12, and I ain't gonna let nobody hurt it. And so I'm 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 not gonna let nobody have me upset like that. But at the end of the day, some men cry, some men don't, but that doesn't mean that they're not emotional. I know men that would never shed a tear in public, but would drive across 3 states to help their child. I know men that don't say "I love you" every day, but will sit in the hospital all night in a waiting room. I know men who don't always know how to express their emotions with words, but they express them, with action. And at the end of the day, that's emotion too.
And David, I think you touched on something important. We've seen a lot of years defining emotions by what we see. There's tears, sadness, crying, but emotions are much bigger than that. Dedication is an emotion. Loyalty is an emotion. We have to look at these things just a little bit differently. Compassion is an emotion. Service is an emotion. Sacrifice is an emotion. And when I think about fathers, I think about sacrifice. A lot of fathers have quietly sacrificed things their families never even knew about. So let's stay here for a minute because I think many of us can relate to fathers who made sacrifices we didn't fully understand until we became adults ourselves. Maybe it was a father who worked double shifts. Maybe it was a grandfather who never missed a game. It was the uncle who stepped in when someone else stepped out. And maybe it was a mentor who wasn't really related by blood, but showed up anyway. As children, we often see the results. As adults, we finally understand the cost, and that's the difference. So let me ask you both, what is one lesson your father, grandfather, or a man who helped raise you taught you that still sticks with you today?
Well, for me, It's one thing, and it's real simple. Your word is your bond. If you tell somebody you're going to do something, you need to do it. And if you can't do it, you need to make sure you communicate that to them. Because that lesson has followed me throughout my career, my time in the military, my family life, my work, and even my work in the labor movement. People may forget what you said, but they won't forget who you were, and they'll never forget whether or not they could trust your word. So you doing what you say you're going to do is like super. I mean, that's your superpower.
Mine would be this, to treat people on your way up, right on your way up, because you might see them again on your way down. I don't fully understand that when I didn't fully understand that when I was younger, but the older I get, I've gotten the more I realize relationships matter. Your character is huge. It matters. How you treat people matters, and that's a lesson that has stayed with me. Um, Another thing is handle your responsibilities first, then enjoy yourself. At the time, it sounded like a lecture. Today, it sounds like wisdom. The older we get, the more we realize our parents and elders knew exactly what they were talking about.
And that right there is a bit of truth. I think everybody I know that's an adult eventually reaches that moment where they realize that their father was right about something they spent years arguing about.
Oh, absolutely. You spend half your life saying they don't know what they're talking about. I know I was that child, honey. I was ready to move out so I could be grown. And
Right.
then and then one day you're repeating the exact same advice to somebody younger than you. That's me with my daughter. And suddenly you become the person you swore you'd never become. It's
And,
funny
and
how
it,
it happens like that.
and it's kind of crazy because that's the way I that's how it happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened, with my kids. When you're growing up, when you're toddler age and all that, looking at your parents, they're just like superhuman. They're basically, the closest thing to God for you. They can't do no wrong. And then, you get into your adolescent years, you start questioning their decision making, or they don't know what they're talking about. And then when before those 20s hit, your folks don't know nothing. They're just they're just imbeciles. They don't know anything, and you know everything. And once you hit those 30s, you're like, you know what? They really wasn't as bad as I thought. They might be on to something. And I always like to break it down, and say, hey, life is, growing up and aging is like taking a trip. If I'm taking a trip from Texas to California, and I leave 2 weeks before you do, and then I call back to you, you're leaving 2 weeks later, and I say, hey, do not take Interstate 20. It's the road is completely shut down. You're gonna, be diverted. You're gonna be in traffic. Find an alternate route. And you say, now the maps say I need to go there. I'm just gonna go ahead and go. Well, then shame on you. I tried to prevent you from coming this way. And so that's the way agent is. I've just been on the trip a little bit longer. And when I'm calling back to you, it's to give you guidance so you don't hit some of the landmines that I hit.
And that's what we call growth. Because before we leave this conversation, I would like to just talk to our listeners um, about something. Who is the man that helped shape your life? It may not have been your biological father. It may not have been your grandfather. It could have been an uncle, a coach, a pastor, a teacher, a union brother, a neighbor. It could be more than one person, or a mentor who stepped in when they didn't have to. Whoever that person is, please reach out to them this week. Give them a call, send them a text, write them a note, tell them thank you, tell them what they meant to your life. Tell them that their sacrifices mattered. Tell them that their lessons stuck because too often we wait until people are gone to give them their flowers. Let's do it while they're still here to hear it. But before we close this conversation, I do want to talk about something serious. We spent the last several minutes discussing emotions, vulnerability, and what it means to be fully human. For some people, those emotions become overwhelming. Sometimes the weight of life becomes heavier than people feel they can carry it. And that's especially true for many of our veterans who have carried the weight of military service, their deployments, their trauma, the loss, and the difficult transition back to into a civilian life. But this message isn't just for veterans, it's for every man. It's for every man that's listening. It's for every worker carrying stress, every father carrying responsibility, every grandfather carrying grief, every person who feels like they have to handle everything by themselves. Guess what? You don't. If you're struggling, talk to somebody, a friend, a family member, pastor, counselor, union brother or sister, trusted mentor. And if you need immediate support, help is available. You can call or text 988, three simple numbers, 988. If you're a veteran, call 988 and press 1 to reach the Veterans Crisis Line. Um, you can call it or text it. Veterans, call 988 and press 1. Just wanted to say that again, so people can hear me. Because strength is not suffering in silence. Strength is knowing when to reach out. And somebody needs to hear this today. There's the people who love you would rather hear your pain than attend your funeral. And there's no weakness in that. That's humanity, that's courage, and that's what we've been talking about this entire segment. The strength was never the absence of emotion. The strength is emotion.
And that's why this was a powerful conversation today. I'd like to say, as we move beyond Father's Day, uh, perhaps this is something, that all of us can remember. You know, the men in your lives aren't strong because they never feel. They're strong because they keep loving, they keep caring, they keep sacrificing. They keep showing up. But they're also human, and every human being deserves the dignity, the respect, and the freedom to be fully human. So, every father, grandfather, mentor, veteran, union brother, community leader, and every man listening today, we see you, we appreciate you, and we thank you. And if you're carrying something heavy today, remember that you don't have to carry it alone. Help is available. You are listening to KYOK 1140 AM and the all new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting kyokradio.org and pressing the listen live option. Tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on kyokradio.org, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at CWA National Human Rights to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join the conversation. Up next is my Marshall Minute, and I'm going to be talking about something that's very, very simple that most of us can do, and that is just moving and the benefits of everyday movement. Now, if you're someone who feels frustrated when you hear the words, you really need to go get your daily exercise, or for me, starting a new workout plan every Monday, well, it's time to understand it's all about movement, and there's very little that needs to be involved to get that started. All right. That's right. It's time to stop thinking of daily exercise as a commitment with minimum requirements like running 5 miles or bench pressing, your body weight. The demand can be far less taxing and should fit your fitness level. From your brain to your joints, moving every day has the power to improve every part of your body. And it's not just about high impact and being extra sweaty while you're exercising or running 50 miles, either. It's really simple. Whether you choose to implement small movements into your routine, or try a new activity like cycling or yoga, increase your daily mobility can upgrade your overall health. So it's important, to start small. And when I say small, I mean, like trying to do, something simple like stretching, body stretches, hurdle stretches, for 10 minutes a day, walking laps around your house or your neighborhood, or, on your lunch break at the office, or when you're on a call, take a spin around the neighborhood, and if you can, uh, try to incorporate, some yoga or some meditation in there, because all your movements will add up. And small movements have significant impact on both your physical and mental health. And, you can do them, a lot of times from the comfort of your home or work without having to even change into gym clothes. My knees are bad, but I said I'm gonna start taking the stairs, and it's just like my Mondays. I'm gonna start taking the stairs. So uh, I'm gonna discuss some benefits, of movement. The first thing is your muscles. You have more than 600 muscles in your body that contribute to about 40% of your total body weight. And by simply moving, you're strengthening those muscles, which improves your stability, your balance, and your coordination. But, with all that, don't forget stretching because that helps maintain your muscle health and keeps you from having getting injuries. But next are your bones. Movement helps build more durable and denser bones. Bone building activities like resistance training, lifting weights and, weight bearing exercises, while you're jogging or walking or hiking, and even balance training, with yoga can support better bone density. And then after that, you have your joints, which, like I said, with yoga, it helps dramatically, because yoga is all about body awareness. So you are compelled to pay attention to each and every movement. And by being aware of how you move, you can increase coordination and balance. So be mindful of the position of your joints and just relax. Plus, yeah, yoga encourages flexibility and range of motion, which boosts joint flexibility and joint function. So, I've said yoga about 30 times in this segment. Yoga is something that you definitely need to, you can look up a YouTube video to do yoga. You don't have to go to a class. And then we have the brain. Something simple like walking 30, 40 minutes a day, 3 times per week, it can help regrow the structures of the brain linked to cognitive decline in older adults. So if you're working from home or you have a park or a parking lot that you can walk through, make an effort to take walks because I've noticed when I do walks, it usually clears my head. It gives me an opportunity to unplug, from the stresses of work. So definitely take the earplugs out and just listening to everything around you and get a good walk in. Now, I'm gonna ask you, Timmy. Let me ask you this: when life gets stressful for you, and we know stress is real these days, what is one of your go-to activities that you use to clear your mind and keep you moving?
For me, it's walking. I love to walk. It's walking. Walking is my jam. I like to go and walk at the lake. That's my thing.
Yeah, I notice when I'm walking, I try to set the parameters. I got the run app that I can get on there and kind of track it. Uh, but I notice I feel better afterwards. I don't really feel good walking in Texas heat, but when I'm done, when I'm all done, I actually do feel pretty good. It's kind of like
It
a
is.
euphoria
Yes.
that you get after a workout. It's similar to having a nice drink,
Yes.
it's the same, gives me the same illusion.
That's
Uh,
it. The hardest
yeah,
part is getting started for me. The
and,
hardest part is getting out there and taking that first step.
well, that's why I said I keep starting over every Monday because I have all intentions Sunday night that this is gonna be the week that I do this. And Monday gets here and
Yeah,
it just don't happen. So
it
I'm
don't.
I'm gonna listen to this minute today because I'm gonna start this.
You
But
really don't. We'll report back. We'll have to
we'll
report
report
back.
back. Yeah, we'll have to
Yeah.
update you on this one.
So we're
Well,
gonna
up
start next
next,
Monday or this Monday? What we doing?
I'm gonna say this Monday. We're gonna
This
go
Monday
this
coming?
Monday.
All
This
right.
Monday is we starting. All right.
Okay.
So I'm gonna
All
hold you
right.
to that. All right. Well, up next, I'm gonna talk about the heart. And according to Heart Foundation, you can avoid around 10,000 fatal heart complications each year if you keep fit. So I would suggest moving. Try Try something, walking, jogging, cycling, any of those things can help improve your heart health, because it's a fun way to move, especially cycling. That is a real good way to move that's low impact. And unless you're showboating and you wreck, that could be high impact. But all jokes aside, regular cycling can cut your risk of heart disease by up to 50%. So the next question is from Makia. Are you on here, Makia? You're not on here?
Nope, I'm not on here because I don't want to talk about exercise because your girl was doing
Yeah, no, you ain't escaping. You ain't
your girl was
escaping.
doing
No,
well, and then I went on vacation and it was like move your
Honey,
legs by yourself.
right,
right.
Absolutely.
Like open the door and do
right.
what? No.
Well, my question for you, and I'll start it off with this. A lot of people think they don't have enough time to exercise. So, what is one simple way you think people can incorporate more movement into their daily routine without completely changing their whole schedule around?
So I tell you, I look at it as like small wins in multiple ways. And so for me, it's just um like just for the daily things that I do. So I'll park further in the parking lot when I'm going to the grocery store. Um, like they said, it's healthier to stay around the perimeter of the grocery store. That adds more steps into your day. Like actually cooking your food and when you cleaning your house and folding your laundry and all that stuff, you're actually still moving and cleaning your house at the same time. So I feel like the days where I don't actually exercise, if I at least do those things, I'm still getting my steps in and my movement in. And then my other guilty pleasure, I feel like when I need to release some stress is if I don't, or if I feel like I don't have time to like go to like Timmy said, the lake or the trail or the gym or even walk on my walking pad that I have. Like I have a walking pad desk. So when I'm feeling really like motivated, I'll do that. But even when I don't do that, honey, I'm gonna walk around the mall and do a little retail therapy at the same time, get a 2 for 1. I'm gonna walk around Marshalls and Home Goods and get a little 2 for 1. And that's how I get my small movements in when I'm not necessarily motivated or encouraged to actually work out.
I know folks that walk the malls, like especially the older malls that back when malls were the thing everybody hung out in. I used to know folks that were retired that that was their thing. They'll bring the little walking stick and they walk around the mall and I know for me. That getting around that food court would be an issue. So I don't think I'm gonna be able to do the mall walking because that's the borrow be speaking to me.
Well, let me tell you something right now. If you ever walk around the mall and go into the store and then sit there in them little tight dressing rooms and try on some clothes for a few minutes, I bet you burn a lot of calories.
For real. Ask me how I
I
know.
burn calories just trying to button that button is for
That's
me.
it. Ask me how I know. Hmm.
Well, lastly, I want to move to your lungs. Because we've been discussing all parts of your body that this movement helps. So keeping your heart rate will improve your cardiorespiratory endurance as well. Circuit training with a personal trainer or like a group fitness class or cycling class, a spin class, are good solutions for that. But again, you don't have to like go all out and be high intensity in the movement. Just try to start gradually and build yourself up because all those things will still get your lungs going, but at a more comfortable pace. And so the last thing I want to throw out here, and this is for both of y'all. If someone is listening right now hasn't exercised in months or even years, what would you say to encourage them for their very first step today?
For me, I would say, you know, any day can be day one.
Right,
Any
right.
day can be life changing, right? As long as you try, you're succeeding.
That's a
Yeah,
good one.
that's good. Yeah.
That's good. For me, I would say start a vision board. You can start there and picture yourself and having the life and being in the life that you want once you start working out? What are your goals? Look at your goals. Start picturing yourself living that life. Start believing you're living that life. And that really motivated me. That really motivates me to when I can go back to my goals. I can go back to my vision board and see exactly what I planned out for myself. And that helps keep me motivated and gets me started.
Okay. Well, those are both great ways to get started. And, I would just say, just move and just avoid being inactive. Find something or several activities you love to do and commit to it daily. Whether it's, taking walks, or winging on a swing at the park, make it happen. If you're interested in yoga and you haven't made the leap, try a group exercise. And if you used to run and you want to pick it up, start out by walking and slowly progress up to it. But also remember to check with your doctor or healthcare professional before starting a new exercise program, especially if you have any concerns about your fitness or haven't exercised in a very long time. Check with them if you have chronic health problems such as heart disease, diabetes, or arthritis. But whatever you choose to do, get started now, because even short periods of physical activity done regularly can have a positive impact on your health, your quality of life. So until next time, this has been the Marshall Minute, where living well is the greatest act of love. You're listening to KYOK Radio 1140 AM and the all new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting kyokradio.org and pressing the listen live option. Tune in every Thursday, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on KYOK Radio, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at CWA National Human Rights to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join the conversation. All right. On this next block here, we're all on the same team. What rights looks like when communities come together. Now, on this subject, we don't discuss this nearly enough in the human rights movement, and that's joy, community, and culture. And that happens when people from different backgrounds come together and simply recognize each other's humanity. Recently, comedian Dave Chappelle attended the opening of the Obama Presidential Center and was interviewed by the press. What stood out wasn't politics. It wasn't policy. It wasn't party affiliation. It was something deeper. Chappelle said it was like medicine for me because the time seemed so dark. And so let that sink in. A comedian known for making people laugh describe seeing people together as medicine, not medicine from a pharmacy, not medicine prescribed by a doctor, medicine created through community, medicine created through culture, and medicine created through human connection. And maybe that's exactly what our nation needs right now.
David, what struck me was when Chappelle said, "Today was a celebration of culture and community." As human rights activists, we often spend our time discussing discrimination, inequality, attacks on voting rights, labor rights, LGBTQIA plus rights, racial justice, women's rights, disability rights, and immigrant rights. And we should. Those conversations matter, but sometimes we forget to celebrate what we're fighting for. We're fighting for moments where people from different races, religions, political beliefs, backgrounds, and generations can gather together and feel safe, where they can laugh together, where they can see each other as human beings first. Human isn't just being about stopping oppression, it's also about creating belonging for people.
Well, and that's so true because human rights documents around the world don't just talk about freedom from discrimination. They talk about dignity. And dignity wasn't simply surviving. It's being able to participate in that community. It's being seen, it's being respected, it's being valued. And what Dave Chappelle described wasn't a political event. It was a reminder that our people are hungry for connection.
And that's what really resonated with me. When he joked about President Obama asking the crowd how y'all like my tan suit, everybody laughed. But beneath the joke was something deeper. Remember when a tan suit became a national controversy? I remember it. Today, many Americans look back and laugh because we live through far more serious issues. What that joke highlights, though, is how much our political climate has changed. And like me, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm exhausted. Um, tired of anger. I'm tired of anger or tired of outrage, tired of being told who to hate. And when people saw former presidents together, smiling and interacting as human beings, it reminded them that disagreement doesn't have to mean division.
And that's where I think, human rights enters the conversation because human rights require us to understand a simple truth. You don't have to agree with everyone to recognize their humanity. You don't have to vote the same. You don't have to worship the same. You don't have to look the same. You don't even have to love the same. But every person deserves dignity. Every person deserves respect. Every person deserves human rights. So one thing I noticed, from the special was that the cameras captured throughout the event, there were Black, whites, Latinos, Asians, young, old, union folks, business leaders, artists, faith leaders, families. People wasn't gathered because they agreed on everything. They were gathered because they shared something bigger, and that was hope. And that's exactly what this human rights movements have always looked like. So, let's remember, the civil rights movement wasn't only Black folks. The labor rights movement wasn't only workers. Women's right movement wasn't only women. Marriage equality wasn't only LGBTQIA plus people. The strongest movements in histories were coalitions and people standing together for someone else's rights because they understood those rights were connected to their own.
And that's powerful. That's a lesson unions understand. When a worker is treated unfairly, every worker is treated unfairly. When voting rights are attacked, democracy is weakened for everyone. When one person is dehumanized, eventually others will be too. Human rights teach us that our futures are all connected.
And that's why one of Chappelle's comments hit me so hard. He said, seeing everyone together reminded us that we're all on the same team. Now, let's be honest on this. Some people may hear that and say, well, it doesn't feel like we're on the same team. And that's a fair point. But human rights work has always required us to imagine a bigger, better than the conflict of the moment type of thing. Dr. King did it. Dolores Herrera did it. Fannie Lou Hamer did it. Uh, Bernard Rustin did it. A. Philip Randolph did it. They challenged injustice while still believing a better America was possible.
And maybe the lesson is simple, right? Like we need more spaces where people encounter each other as human beings instead of stereotypes. Not online avatars, not political labels, not social media arguments, actual people. Because it becomes harder to hate someone once you share to laugh with them.
Maybe that's why laughter is so powerful. Laughter temporarily removes the walls. For a moment, people stop performing, they stop fighting, they stop posturing, and they remember they're human. Dave Chappelle called it medicine. Maybe that's exactly what it is or what it was. It's healing.
And perhaps that's the human rights challenge of our generation. Can we fight injustice without you losing our humanity? Can we challenge systems while still seeing people? Can we disagree without dehumanizing? Can we build coalitions across differences? Can we create communities where everybody feels like they belong? Because human rights isn't just about laws, it's about relationships, it's about culture, it's about community, it's about recognizing the dignity of every person. Dave Chappelle said something that stayed with me. In that interview, he said that today reminded him of times that wasn't so tough and when we didn't realize how good we had it. And maybe that's the reminder for all of us that human rights isn't simply about surviving difficult times. It's about creating better times. It's about building communities where people can gather, people can laugh, people can celebrate their culture and see themselves in one another. Because when people come together across differences, something powerful happens. Fear loses its grip, division loses its power, and hope begins to grow. And as human rights activists, labor activists, and community leaders, let's continue building spaces where dignity is protected, culture is celebrated, and every person knows they belong. Because at the end of the day, despite all of our differences, we rise together, we struggle together, and ultimately, we're all on the same team. You are listening to KYOK Radio, 1140 AM, and the all-new 106.5 FM. If you're on the go, you can take us with you by visiting KYOK Radio and listen and pressing the Listen Live option. Tune in every Thursday, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on kyokradio.org, the CWA Strong app, or your preferred podcast player. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at CWA National Human Rights to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join the conversation. And as we wind down to the final minutes of the show, I just want to announce this. The Communication Workers of America invite you to the 2026 National Human Rights Conference happening in August 16th through the 19th in Atlanta, Georgia. Come join union leaders and activists from across the country as we come together and build our advance justice and fight for workers' rights. This year's conference will be held at the beautiful Westin Peachtree Plaza, located in the heart of downtown Atlanta. To register, visit cwahumanrights.com. Don't miss this opportunity to connect, learn, and organize for a stronger, more just future. We hope to see you all in Atlanta. And I'm going to leave you with this. The future isn't decided by the loudest voices. It's decided by the people who show up. So show up for your community, show up for your union, show up for your family, and show up for democracy, because democracy is not a spectator sport, and neither is justice. So remember to stay informed, stay engaged, stay involved. And our rights, our voices, our community, our power. Because at the end of the day, rights that aren't exercised will be lost, and voices that aren't used will be ignored, and power that isn't organized will be taken away. So, on behalf of everyone here at CWA Our Power, thank you for listening. For Micaiah Jones, Timmia Wiley, and our entire CWA family, I'm David Marshall. Make sure you meet us back here next Thursday, same time, same place, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, and 8 a.m. Pacific, right here on KYK Radio 1140 and the all-new 106.5 FM, or listen to us at kyokradio.org and pressing the Listen Live option. Y'all take care now.